It's a crazy world we live in, and there are very few public figures out there who are willing to speak their minds in a completely raw and honest way, even if it means losing money and advertisers. And as of late, Alex Karp, the CEO of Palantir, has been on absolute fire. I mean, without a doubt, this man is speaking his mind in a way that not a lot of people are doing right now. And what I'm about to show you is a recent interview that he did at the Reagan Institute. He's basically calling out all the weak-minded leaders of the free world for their hypocrisy and willingness to let their own country, the United States, fall in second place to nations with corrupt leaders like Russia and China. Now, if you've been following my channel, I'm sure you'll know that I think political correctness is absolute garbage, and people should be allowed to speak what's on their minds. Which is why I respect Palantir as a company so much, as the leaders of this company are incredibly bold and outspoken. But I'm rambling now. Let me show you guys the highlights of Alex Karp's recent interview. So sit back, relax, and enjoy.
It's like the polls are very good, but we in corporate America, we who are running publicly traded companies, are an abysmal failure at standing up to people who are anti-American, who are breathing the vapors of a thin new religion at elite schools, who actually believe it would be better to have the world run by China than by America, and we're silent. As far as I can tell, there are only 3 companies that have been publicly pro-Israel on October 7th. There's Booz Allen, sometimes we disagree with him, there's Anduril, and there's Palantir. 3 companies. We have to do better. And that's not a problem with the politicians. Of course, the politicians don't do enough, with notable exceptions. But it's, you know, we have, like, somehow the corporate elite of this country thinks when it's time to make money, you stand up. And when it's time to stand up, you go play golf. And, like, we got to change that. That's our fault. That's no one else's fault. There were, unfortunately, way too many people on October 7th who were happy. And we have to acknowledge we have a huge problem in the Western world with anti-Semitism. And we cannot, not all criticism of Israel is anti-Semitism, but a larger portion of it is than we realized. And we have to call it out. And I'm one of the largest donors to the Democratic Party, and quite frankly, I'm calling it out and I'm giving to Republicans. If you keep up with this behavior, I'm going to change. A lot of people like me are going to change. We have to really call this out. It is completely beyond the bounds. That's before you get to the Israel thing. Most Americans, again, most Americans who are not elite institutions, see this battle for what it is. You see a one side which is powered by terrorism, that is using terrorist means, and that will expand its footprint to the West if it's not pushed back. And I am not a legislator, but I am running one of the coolest companies in the world, and I'm telling young people, you are breathing the vapors of a dangerous, new, fake, and self-destructive religion when you are sitting at your elite school pretending because you watched TikTok twice and got an A+ on some crazy paper because your professor couldn't get a job anywhere else, that you actually understand the world. And you're not welcome at my company. I've always been interested, partly because I've had to be, about the difference between IQ and wisdom. And in Silicon Valley, we have historically had the smartest people in the world, but most people don't have the sense God gave a goat. And the American people are also among the smartest people in the world, but we have a wisdom advantage. So when I see that, what I really see is Americans are intuiting that if you want to hurt China and Iran, you better be able to be stronger than China, because it's the dominant economic force in the world. And it is actually different because you're competing against an adversary with peer-like economy, peer, or in some cases better engineering, and advantages and disadvantages in how they run their country. On the AI front, the misperception that most Americans have comes from something that is, it's this weird thing when you're the best in the world at something, like America is. America is by far the best in the world at entertainment, music, and software. It's so dominant in software that our B League, we have 5 products, any one of those products would be the most important, most valuable startup in Germany, by far. The most important question any VC asks before they invest is, where's your company? And if it's not here, you're gonna have a hard time. I was talking to someone who was saying off the record, and I've heard this many times, that Z says openly, we're behind in AI, and that's because they are. And we underestimate, partly because a lot of the AI innovation goes into domestic commercial companies, and that's a separate issue. How do you get that advantage into our the most important part of our economy, which is defense, or I would like to call offense, against our adversaries? The reason for the misperception is when you are just naturally good at something, you assume that somebody who's naturally good at things we're not, like in general, there's good or better at hardware. They have a system we wouldn't want to live in, but it appears to work. And so that's just wrong. The issue for us is, how do we make sure the advantage we have gets to the most important people, and those people are in this room? And that is the issue we have. The issue they have is they're behind. And they know it. And they have an advantage because they know it, and we have a disadvantage because we may not know it. You know, a lot of people won't work at Palantir, but unfortunately for our adversaries, many of the best people in the world only want to work at a company like Palantir. Now, on Ukraine, you know, on October 8th, I ended up talking with very senior Israelis, and I begged them. I said, the one mistake you cannot make is the mistake I believe. I support, obviously, defending Ukraine, and I see it as like jailhouse rules. You let Russia come into our cell, it won't be the last time. So, and this is what we do not teach at our elite institutions. It's not like, oh, hey, we switch papers. But you have to show Americans in a visual way the savagery of our adversaries. Americans, as these numbers show, are way too decent to ever imagine what Hamas would do. Almost no American can imagine what Hamas did. Very few Americans can imagine what Russia does and why. You have to show them. And we have to have a more direct dialogue with people that's visual and passionate, and where you say, yeah, you're just completely full of that, you know. Like, you have to have that dialogue. We do not bring that dialogue. And of course, the American people wander off, because if they don't believe you believe, I mean, really believe, and you're not showing them the actual facts, they have other priorities, and they do see a looming China, which really scares them. And so, you know, I think there's a lot of room to improve these things, but I think that's the mistake that was made. We have the moral high ground. We should not cede it by saying we're making money. Of course
You can make both. You can make both.
Well, we shouldn't cede it by saying that the reason we're doing this is we want to make more tanks.
You have to win the argument. You have to win the argument with people who disagree with us. Everyone here, if you make that argument in Europe or in Harvard University, people are like, okay, great, so you're saying we're going to... One of the key lessons of Silicon Valley dominates the world in the most important area, which is technology, and primarily software, now AI. We make moral arguments, we build our companies around those moral arguments, unless we're consumer internet, in which case we're mostly lying. But, and then we make a lot of money. And what I don't like about that argument is, it's like, yeah, we're making money.
I didn't say we're making money. We are creating jobs. We are creating hot production lines for the concerns. I mean, when you look at the polls, people are worried about China. This is helping us to prepare to defend against China. This is our effort in Ukraine is actually making it less likely that China will invade Taiwan.
The argument
you have to make it from a national interest.
There's true and persuasive. You're making a true argument that's not persuasive to people I would talk to.
Okay, well, I think most Republican voters, where we're lagging, care about national interest. I mean, the problem we're making is we're making the arguments purely in moral. I'm a believer in making the moral case for helping Ukraine. It's the right thing to do, but it's also the right thing to do for America.
By winning in Ukraine, we are not only going to hurt Russia, we're going to hurt China, but we're going to do it in a way where we learn lessons that give us military and economic superiority over China. You will see Americans follow it. But the argument that is being made now is we do not show people, either in Israel or in Ukraine, what's actually happening on the battlefield. Then we make this kind of argument, when instead we should be saying, we have the moral superiority, and the way the Ukrainians won on the battlefield, we are going to learn those lessons, we are going to import them to America, and we are going to scare the bejeebers out of China. That's an argument Americans will follow. I don't see people making that in my industry enough. And you have to link them. And again, we have an industry that has been the best in the world at doing this. We should just copy what it does and make those arguments, and I think we will do. But again, these are really strong numbers. If you want to select just a simple thing, I want to find object the size of a Coke bottle in a desert the size of Texas, and I need to do it quickly, that is a problem that you will need algorithms, what lay people call AI, to do. And without that, you're going to spend thousands of human hours, and your adversary, if your adversary has as many humans and those humans are willing to work around the clock, i.e. your adversary is China, you're going to lose. So AI really has two components for American security. The most important that's going to happen no matter what anyone does in this room is the American economy is going to outperform every economy in the West. We have a business in Europe. In Europe, it's like 10 years ago, and you can't talk to them about what it means to implement things where you are essentially augmenting the value of a human or replacing a human. In this country, every single company in America wants a way of making their margins better, their systems work better, their workers more efficient. They want to bring manufacturing from Japan and manufacture like you were in Japan with American workers. And this is going to completely transform our GDP relative to other countries. And hopefully that will be used to power the critical work. In the US government, if you asked a different question, you asked Americans, define AI as a software, piece of software that actually works. Okay, let's just call it that. Whether it's algorithms, large language models, it's something that works as a product. And you asked Americans, what percentage of the DoD or anything is being spent on that? You'd probably get an answer like 20%, 30%. It's under 1%. We really have to change how we spend on these things. We are ahead of China, but we cannot beat China when they're going to spend 20, 30% of their total budget, and we're arguably spending, no matter how you count the numbers, 1%. And so, and where does it help? It helps. One of the things that's really cool about AI broadly defined is it accelerates things that are working into a different level. So if your tank works, you can make it better. Your supply chain that's broken can be made to work. Your plane can be guided. By the way, you talk about the industrial base. Yes, we don't have enough munitions, but if you use software, you can get a 10x efficiency ratio on those. So you need 1/10. You need less money, and it goes a lot further. And then I don't want to make this all about talking to the American people. The American people intuitively are wise. The American people look out and say, our software companies are the best in the world. I wonder what they're doing on defense. And like, you want to connect with the American people, you've got to connect to things they see, they use. And that actually will change how the American people will support these things. If you look at like the rough numbers, if you look at market cap of American companies, say compared to European or any other companies, we're back to like the 60s where America is just dominant. So in contradiction to what I said before, I think first of all I should make the economic argument, which is like we are winning. And it's going to get worse and worse and worse for our NATO allies because they're making terrible investments in tech. And it's, I say this as I have screamed at people in Europe where that's not going to change. And it's so bad that, and this is a bad idea, it's not practical, but we'd be better off having, at least when it comes to AI, enhanced weaponry, if they paid less but absorbed some of our costs. Because like, what really a lot of these programs are doing, if we're being honest, is just taking 2% and spending on their local industry, which in the hardware context might be a good idea, but if you have a software industry you're killing by creating protection and keeping companies like mine out, you have no future in the area that's the most important thing. And so I would be a little more gentle on this because we're winning and like force real accounting. Because 1% on something that's real is a lot better than this 2% fake, it's fake, we get to say we did it kind of thing.